Congressman Dan Goldman is from New York City.
No, it's not here yet. So say hi, talk to him.
Congressman, thank you.
No, he's not in yet. Talk to this audience. There you
Who
go.
am I talking to?
The audience.
Oh, really? We've got Dan Goldman coming on from New York City, and he's been one of the hot stars, I think, of the Democratic House for a while now. He's coming on in just a moment. I want to talk about his district. I want to talk about the shutdown and what we can do about it. And he joins us in a few minutes, or he joins us now. Not yet. This is an unsettled area of technology. And he's coming on in a minute. Not on yet. We're trying to get Dan Goldman on in a minute now. He's from New York City, and I want to talk about where his district lies and how it fits in with Nadler's district and some of the districts up there. Congressman, trying to wait. Can't wait much longer. We want to talk about the government shutdown, of course, to start with, and when it's going to end. We're waiting for him.
Yes.
We're just trying to wait for Congressman Goldman now. Danny Goldman. Oh, this is unrelieved to get these to remember to come on. Oh gosh, has it happened like this before? Of course, the Democrats would like to take next. Sure, they could do a very small pickup. Of course, they get the subpoena power with that, which has always been a goal of the Democrats. Get the subpoena power. It means you can impanel witnesses. You can find out what's really going on in the government in terms of administration, and things change. We learned that in Watergate. And I want to find out what I can from Dan Goldman. This doesn't happen like this on television. You don't wait for people. We move on. So most of the Democrats are back in their districts right now. Government shutdown's been 6 days, and we're waiting to see how long it's going to go. I am tired of hearing different arguments from the Democrat and the Republican Party, and I want to try to get to the heart of the difference and how the language is different and what they're actually saying that may in both cases be true. But that will require me getting Congressman Dan Goldman on the phone here.
And he's having technical difficulties.
What's going on?
He's having technical difficulties.
I'm going to push back some of these guests.
Okay, that would be good.
Well, one thing I could do during this time is talk about my book coming out, Memories, actually Lessons from Bobby. It's about Robert F. Kennedy, former Attorney General of the United States. And my book comes out November 11th of this year. I've been working really hard on it, and we'll have something about opening. I think the world will know about that book when it comes out. I talked to his son, Robert Kennedy Jr., and told him the book's coming out. It doesn't talk about him, it talks about his father. By the way, the Justice Department building right now in Washington is named after Robert F. Kennedy, which tells you a lot about what a good Attorney General he was. He desegregated the University of Mississippi, Ole Miss. He desegregated the University of Alabama. He really worked with his brother hand in hand to introduce the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which John Kennedy introduced in June of 1963 in a very dramatic speech, which Bobby helped to write, and a lot to do with producing that speech and that reality of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. So there's really never been an attorney general like Bobby Kennedy. So we'll see. That comes out November 11th. That's the pub date. You can get copies of that book, Lessons from Bobby, right now. Actually, you can order them right now from Simon & Schuster, who actually came to me to write the book. Because I wrote a very big selling book several years ago called Robert F. Kennedy, Raging Hero. And that was quite a successful book. I guess that's the reason why they wanted more from me this year. We're going to talk about David McCullough's researcher, Michael Hill, who's going to be talking about lots of things today. And I'm telling you, that's set up. It's very concerning that we're not starting on time. I don't understand this really. Oh, one of the conundrums is the question of how politicians tell the truth their way. Thomas Jefferson once said that the whole art of politics is the art of telling the truth. So you listen carefully to what people say, politicians say. Bill Clinton would say famously, "I did not have sexual relations with that woman." Well, that was his definition. These are terms used very carefully to make them deliver the truth or to sometimes disguise it. But they're very effective the way politicians talk. And what's the difference between someone in the country illegally who doesn't have documentation and someone in the country who has lawfully permitted in the country? And there's a big difference because one's legal and one's not. And I'm not sure that Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, has been clear on that, or the Democrats, because there's a difference. One says it's a lie when you say somebody is getting health care benefits in this country, even though they're not here legally. And another party, the Democrats, say, no, that's not happening. See, wait a minute, how can that be different? How can they both be telling the truth, even vaguely? What are they up to here? Well, they're talking different versions of the truth, different versions, because they've calculated it that way in their language, oftentimes. So when I listen to politicians, I say, it's an interesting way of saying something. Let's say somebody, when they use a language that doesn't seem familiar, you wonder why they use that language, that particular language, and to cover themselves. Oh, God, it's quarter after.
His phone's not working.
This is ridiculous. We're going to have to move on here.
Yeah.
I think we're going to have to excuse the congressman. This very saddens me, to say the lightest. Let's move on. I don't want to. I think we're going to have Michael Hill now, who's a great researcher, or David McCullough, will be our first guest today. We're not going to interrupt once we start. It's the first time this has happened.
Hey, Chris, can you hear me?
Michael, thank you so much for joining us. You were the researcher for David McCullough, for the great historian, for how many years?
Just about 40 years. 40 years.
Wow.
That's
a commitment. That's a serious commitment.
Oh, it was wonderful. It was a great, great journey that we had.
Well, you know so many things that I don't know, but let me tell you a story I once heard from David McCullough. the great historian who wrote the book on John Adams, which became a HBO series on television, which you did the historical background on. He said that the reason he wrote a book about John Adams was that he had begun to write a book about Thomas Jefferson and John Adams, a dual biography about both of them. And he decided he didn't like Thomas Jefferson. And out of that recognition on his part, we discovered really one of the great books ever about an American politician, a book written singly about John Adams, an overlooked vice president of the United States. And that, I think that was amazing understanding it and selling the public on a reason why he did what he did. Tell us about that, if you can, about the history of the book, John Adams.
Yeah. Thanks, Chris, first of all, for having me. And also, I have to tell you that David would always love being on your show or watching you. He was a huge fan of yours. So thanks for having me on.
Thanks a lot.
The genesis of the John Adams book, as you said, he initially started out, it was going to be a joint biography of John Adams and Thomas Jefferson. Once he started writing, a combination of things happened. One, on the positive side, is when he started reading Abigail Adams' letters and the correspondence between them, he was so taken by their relationship and how she was such an incredible partner to him in all aspects of his life. So, and then, as you said, that he also got to the point where, Jefferson isn't the great character that I thought he was. So the shift then went to more a John Adams, Abigail Adams book with Thomas Jefferson being a character, what he used to describe as a major minor character.
What people know about are John Adams and Harry Truman. And the Truman biography was so astounding because, again, FDR, Franklin Roosevelt, got all the press, if you will, for his 4 terms as president. And Harry Truman, for his term and a half, didn't really have that. What was it like to discover Harry Truman?
Well, that's another interesting story. How that came about was that initially David was going to do a biography about Pablo Picasso, and he spent about a year working on that and found out that he didn't like Picasso. So he went to his editor and told him, he said, I can't spend another 6 months with this guy. And so the editor said, don't worry about it. They had lunch and he suggested Franklin Roosevelt. And David said, no, I've written a book about the Roosevelts, Mornings on Horseback, Teddy Roosevelt. And he said, if I was going to write a book about any 20th century president, it would be Harry Truman. So he went out to Independence and he was so overwhelmed by the archives out there and the archivists, many who had been there when Truman was still alive. And then the more he dug into it, he realized that this guy was so American from the Midwest, who knew who he was, battled adversity so many times in his life, that he knew that was the guy he wanted to write about.
I was out there for a family wedding years ago with my grandfather-in-law, my father-in-law rather, and my grandfather-in-law, in fact, and the whole family was out there. And one of the papers I dug up at the Truman Library was the original National Security Council paper on the Soviet threat. You know what I'm talking about? Where he talked about
is that NSC 68 or something like that?
Yeah, 68. Yeah. What an amazing document! It told us what was coming. It was a very foreseeing document.
Oh, well, his time. I hooked up with him when he was a couple years into writing the book, and then I would go out with him, and it was just extraordinary that the archivists would pull out the originals of the original. I remember at one point they pulled out the original note that Truman wrote from Potsdam saying, go ahead and release the atomic bomb. It was just so incredible seeing the real thing. And that was one thing about David that I admired what he did, that anytime he wrote a book and got past a certain scene or finished the book, he wanted to try and go see if it existed, the real place where that happened. He wanted to go see where Truman lived, where John and Abigail lived, where the desk that they wrote their wonderful correspondence in, to see where the Wright brothers actually did their flights, where St. Gaudens's sculptor studio was. He always wanted to go to see the real thing for two reasons. One, that it could help put him in that moment with them. There's a wonderful story in the book, uh, in a piece about Harriet Beecher Stowe when she went to Paris. And she went to the Louvre and she stood in front of the famous painting Raft of the Medusa. When David did the Brader Journey book, he went to Paris, went to the Louvre, and stood in front of that painting for about 20 minutes with his little notebook, trying to get his own take on what Harriet Beecher Stowe saw. The other thing that Dory reminded me the other day is that when he wrote something and he went to see the real place, he wanted to see what he had gotten wrong in what he had already written so that he could correct it.
Well, I think about that because I heard him speak when he talked about discussing, thinking about writing a book about Thomas Jefferson and John Adams. He also imagined and told us so how he imagined the place he would be speaking by a lake out in the country in Northern California and what it was going to be like to be there. So he did examine the circumstances of his actual lectures. This new book you've come out with, which you've edited, History Matters, which is number 5 now on the New York Times bestseller list. I'm very impressed. Is it heading higher or where's it going right now? Do you know?
Well, it was five last week, and then it's 10 this week, and uh, hopefully it'll stay on the list. It's great to have David McCullough back on the bestseller list. I'll tell you that much.
It sure. Well, I know a lot of people that trust him completely, and your work helping him. Let me ask you about a question. Why does history matter?
Well, it matters for several reasons, and part of the reason that Dory agreed with Simon and
That's his
Schuster,
daughter.
yeah, David's daughter, Dory McCullough Lawson, is that we thought with the 250th anniversary coming up, that a lot of his writings about the importance of history would be topical, and that perhaps as we move into that year, people might take a time to read and reflect. David's point about history mattering is the fact that it provides lessons from the past for us about the best qualities of the American character in our current times. He thought that our past forebears taught us about the wondrous attitude of tolerance, um, the facing adversity with courage, and that I think above all that Americans are at their best when they work together. And also the fact that there's a line in the book where he said that history from the past can provide an aid to navigation in perilous times. And that's something he said decades ago. And I think by that was what he was saying was that knowing that our ancestors have gone through what he described as their own kind of hell and survived that it can give us a sense of hope even in our own difficult, perilous times, that if we rely and remember the best of the American character, that uh, that that hope will make us move on and survive.
Well, one of the stories you tell in the book that you've picked out from the writings of David McCullough was the story of George Washington and how he lost the Battle of Brooklyn Heights
Yes.
in New York, and how he had to get across the river, and he got good winds that day, and was able to move his army across to Manhattan, and eventually down to New Jersey, and eventually down to Trenton, where he defeated the British, and then at Princeton. An incredible story. I mean, Churchill wrote about that too, about how the real battle that Washington won, the Revolutionary War of our country, was really won along the Delaware, and because it took the successful rear guard action by the Americans. The Continental Army moved back and moved back successfully enough that they could rebuild their forces and eventually take on the British at Trenton. It's an amazing story about guts and men going across the Delaware with bare feet walking in for miles with bare feet in the snow of Christmas time and taking on the best army in Europe, the Hessians.
Yes.
It's a
And
story.
it is a wonderful story. And Chris, I'm glad you brought that up because there's another essay in the book, which was actually a speech that David gave at Providence College, about how much luck figures
Yeah.
into history. And it's incredible that when you really focus on that, in the story that you had about the retreat, the reason that they were able to make the retreat was because as dawn was coming on, the fog set in all through luck, providence, whatever you want to call it, which camouflaged the remainder of their retreat. The other that David mentions in the sketch about Washington, I'm glad you brought that up too, is how fortunate, how lucky we were to have had George Washington in our nation when he did, not only as the general, but then as our first president. How fortunate, how lucky we were as a nation. So it's and how lucky we were with Harry Truman that that we had him to succeed Franklin Roosevelt. Because as David says, he was tough as nails. He knew who he was, and he knew he had a job to do.
I wonder about that. How come we had all these great, they were men, because that's the way men's status was at the time. But you had Thomas Jefferson, who basically created the notion of America as where every man is created equal. And then you had James Madison with the Constitution, and you had Benjamin Frank. Compare it to the people, the great American musicians, the writers of American music, Tin Pan Alley. We had Gershwin and Cole Porter. All of a sudden, these guys live in one clump, the best writers ever of the American songbook. How come they come together? Did they ever come up with a theory why greatness arrives together in a group?
That's a good question. I don't know. And again, does it go back to just that luck happens? I mean, the luck of having Washington at that moment as the general, and the luck of the fog moving in, and then the luck of him agreeing to become president. That all happened within a period of time. But I know what you're saying, and I think it's just that America is lucky through the ages. And David used to always talks about, and he talked about in this book too, that we should be grateful for so much of what we have, uh, for our history, for our culture, for the buildings, for our national parks, our literature, our wonderful literature.
Well, we're in for a streak of luck right now. Not just the Phillies, who lost the 2 opening games at home, but the country is. I look every day across the country, and I look at the people that are being considered, at least intellectually, for the presidency in 2028. I look at J.D. Vance and who's going to run against him and possibly beat him. I think about Gavin Newsom. I wonder about J.B. Pritzker. I think about the people who, Rahm Emanuel, who I met the other day on my program here.
Right.
And I see a dearth. I know there's a lot of middle level people, but I'm not sure greatness is among them. Have you thought about that as an historian? Have you thought about the need for an American clump of greatness
Uh,
or not?
yeah, sure, a little bit. But again, I think that that luck, providence, will come into to play. David, there's a wonderful line in the book where David said that I'm a short-term pessimist, but a long-term optimist. And what he meant by that was that he wasn't a Pollyanna. He could understand how things in the present could be difficult and so forth, but he was always, as he said, a long-range optimist, where he knew that the greatness of the American character, the greatness of the political leaders out there, um, would always come to the fore and make sure that we move on. I was thinking about this whole thing about adversity and what we've been through. I'm sure you remember, Chris, the year 1968, when everybody thought that, the country was going to end or everything was falling apart. Assassinations, the riots in the streets, Tet Offensive, unpopular president, Czechoslovakia, Vietnam, and all that stuff. That was a horrible, horrible year. However, ultimately, we got through that.
Well, in many ways, it was one of my favorite years, despite the horrors. I mean, it had the coming to it, the March on the Pentagon in October of 67, the announcement for President Eugene McCarthy in November of 1967, Bobby Kennedy announcing for president the day before St. Patrick's Day in March of 1968, and of course, the assassinations of Martin Luther King Jr. and Robert Kennedy later on that spring. Then, of course, the assassination of Richard Nixon during the that horrible election year of the Chicago riots.
Right.
I agree, but sometimes, and then 1989 came along, and I go, well, here's my real favorite year because it was the end of the Soviet Union, really, and the opening of the Berlin Wall. And good things happened. You're right, but there are a lot of bad things too. I remember being at the Berlin Wall in 1980 when the wall was actually coming down, and I asked a young East German who actually looked like an anti-war kid from the 1960s. And I said to him, what's freedom mean to you? Was ist Freiheit? Was ist Freiheit? What's freedom mean to you? The wall's coming down. What's it mean to you? And he said, talking to you.
Wow.
And I said, I get it. There's no freedom in the Eastern Bloc. There's no freedom around the Soviet Union or today even. And I thought, that's it. This is what we've been fighting for. And it actually confirmed to me that what we were told in school by the sisters and later on, the Cold War was real.
Right. Yeah.
Freedom was face to understand that it is in case that, my wife disagrees with me about this. She said, I worked for Tip O'Neill for all those years and I wrote speeches for Jimmy Carter before I wrote anything in history. And she always says things to me like, people don't remember Tip O'Neill. And I say, well, they should. They got to understand history. What is it about young people today? They want to go to business school. They want to take business courses. They don't really want to take any history, any liberal arts. I mean, I don't know how you can come out of college and say, well, I didn't study languages. I didn't study history. I didn't study the humanities. But they do. Donald Trump really didn't go to college, did he? I don't think so. There's no evidence of it. He doesn't seem to have any knowledge of history.
Well, Chris, again, a great point. First of all, I remember Tip O'Neill. So what a wonderful character. And you were so lucky to work with him. Secondly, one of the points that David always made, and I'm sure you'll remember this, and he makes in this book and those essays, is yes, that history, that we need to improve history education in the country. He used to talk about how we were raising a generation of historically illiterate young people, and there's a lot of truth to that. And I remember that he used to talk about that not only the lessons of history that I talked about before, but it's important to know who our heroes and our heroines were, but also important to know who our villains were. He used to tell this story about that every once in a while he would hear somebody on TV or somebody give a speech and say, well, that's just a new form of McCarthyism. And David would always say, well, how can anybody know what that understands unless you know who Joe McCarthy was?
Yeah.
So I agree with you. And I think if he were still with us today, he would be really, really out in the forefront, the soapbox. And he used to talk about the importance of history and why the very point that you're making is it has to be taught better, middle school, high school, college levels, and students have to be encouraged to study history.
Yeah, I think so. I remember interviewing someone on Hardball on MSNBC, and he was talking about appeasement. And I said, well, you've used a phrase there, appeasement. What's it reference to? What does it refer to? He had no idea. He had no idea British and the French had sold out Czechoslovakia to Nazis, to Adolf Hitler. He had no idea what it meant. And he admitted on the air, he said to me, you know what? I don't know what I'm talking about, which I have
Yeah.
to say was pretty wonderful to hear that because I think people don't know. And they don't understand McCarthy when chasing after communists, but he didn't really catch any. Nixon caught Alger Hiss, but I don't think McCarthy was very successful. He went after a dentist up in New Jersey. And you go, what was he doing with a dentist who happened to have been a communist at some level intellectually? He's not doing anything. But that was McCarthy, and he drank too much. I mean, that's it. The name of your book, your editing of it, is History Matters. Look at this. This is a very good book. You can read it in a couple of days. You can actually get it done, unlike a lot of books today. You can actually finish it. I have a book on William F. Buckley. I go, what? How can I carry this book? And I agree, they're great books, but this one's really readable. A nice picture of him on the cover, working away. Who did the paintings, by the way, in the inside?
David did those. David did those. One thing that people don't know about him is that he was a wonderful artist, and the house in the front is his house on Martha's Vineyard, and then the painting in the back end sheet, is of his office in the back of that house, way in the back, which is what he called Mission Control, where he did all of his writing and such. So, but those paintings are about Dad. He was a wonderful artist, and he was interested in so many things, music.
Yeah,
It's just
good for him. Good for him, and good that you know him. Good that you worked with him. I want to tell you something. I heard that you like some of my writing, and I have to say the book on Jack Kennedy and the Great Break. Talk about luck. I went up to Choate, where Jack Kennedy went to prep school, boarding school, and I went into the library. Went to the archivist there. He showed me a copy of the headmaster's lecture notes from chapel time. And in the notes was, ask not what your school can do for you, but ask what you can do for school. And I go, wow. I mean, Ted Sorensen, who was Kennedy's speechwriter, did never find out where that came from. It was exactly the language that he used in his inaugural. And I kept thinking, well, he never liked his headmaster. He didn't like Choate. This is Jack Kennedy.
Right.
But somehow the phrasing of that stuck with him. Because it is odd English. Ask not. You don't talk. Most Americans don't talk like that. Ask not what your country can do, but ask what you can do for your country. That was unique, and it seemed to me, quite reasonably, he got that from high school.
Oh yeah, Chris, I have to tell you. First of all, I loved your JFK book. It was absolutely wonderful. I learned so many things. I think I've read every JFK biography, but I picked up so many little tidbits and little estimations that you made of him as a politician, as a person, that I found new perspectives that I found. But the tidbit about the genesis of the phrase from the inaugural back to the headmaster of Choate, I thought was just, as somebody who did research for David, I thought to myself, I got to tip my cap to this guy, because
Thank you.
That was incredible. I loved it. But the whole book was terrific. And I really look forward to your Bobby Kennedy book coming out next month.
Yeah. Funny thing is, I've written those two books on Jack and Bobby in different years. And Jack was on the New York Times list for 14 weeks. And Bobby was on just for 12 weeks, but Bobby outsold Jack. And I thought, that's interesting. I think there's more love with Bobby, maybe more of a personal connection with him, because he was vulnerable. He wasn't this guy above it all like Jack was. He seemed like a guy you could maybe not necessarily get along with, because you never know how you get along with some of these people, but he was vulnerable. And he was shorter than his brothers. He wasn't as handsome as his brothers. He looked great, of course, but he didn't look like his brothers. And you go, he was the runt of the litter. The runt of the litter. That's what his father called him. I said, that's a good life. My God. But I think there's something there that people find like themselves. Something about it. Anyway, thank you. I hope I get to meet you. I want you to answer me one question as we talk. talking like a gangster. Answer me one question. Who out there like John Adams or Harry Truman, my father's favorite Democrat, I should say, who hasn't been discovered yet? I need a topic. I need a hero. Give me one.
Well, let me. Oh, you're great. I love it. Let me do this. Dory, when she was going through David's papers, which is where we found a lot of these items, she found a list. He kept lists all the time, lists of places he
I
loved to
love
go.
it. I love it.
Yeah,
Your heading. Love it. I want that.
books that, yeah, absolutely. But one of the lists she found were that he would always keep a running list of books that he thought he might write or want to write. And that list has 27 titles on it. So if I can get my hands on it and find something, I'll let you know.
I'll give you back 26, and I used one of them. But thank you so much, Michael. It's an honor to have you on. I appreciate your work. I can't imagine the items that you have cooked up, came up with for David McCullough. Everybody, if you go to most houses in D.C. or Georgetown in Washington, you look on their bookshelves, and there is John Adams, and there's Harry Truman. They're on the shelves of most people because they really treasure those books.
Well, you're very kind. He was a huge fan of yours, as I said, and I'm a huge fan, and I love JFK, and I can't wait to get the new Bobby Kennedy book. I know you did one before.
Well, give me a call. We'll go to the Metropolitan Club and act important, okay? Thank you.
Hi.
Thank you, Michael.
Thanks.
Kristen Lyerly is a woman who's an MD and an OBGYN, and it runs something called the Committee to Protect Healthcare. Kristen, are you on?
I sure am, Chris. Thanks so much for having me.
You're on time. I've become to really treasure people that come on time because I'm putting together a show today. I want to talk to you. Take your time. I have in my head history, and his son, of course, is head of Health and Human Services now. What is your major concerns about RFK Jr. as Health and Human Services Secretary?
Where do we even begin, Chris?
Now, measles. Let's start with measles. An outbreak of a common disease which was made uncommon because of doctors giving us injections, vaccinations, something so simple you got in like the second grade or like Holy Communion or confirmation. You just got it as part of growing up. Polio vaccine, Jonas Salk. You didn't have to worry about it because some doctor worried about it and cured it. And now we're going back to square one with this guy. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, these vaccines are a victim of their own success, aren't they? When they work, we don't have disease, and then people think that they don't need the vaccines anymore because there's no disease. That's the problem. But when you look at what RFK Jr. has done in his professional life, and he is on video over and over and over again talking about vaccines and how unsafe they are, talking about a connection to autism, which has been disproven repeatedly, now talking about Tylenol in pregnancy and how that causes autism. We know that's not the case. There is no causation link between Tylenol and pregnancy. But when I'm seeing my patients, they're worried because pregnant people want to do the best thing for their kids. And they don't want their families, their kids to be harmed. They're precious. So they're worried about whether this is real or not. And
it's families. It's called gaslighting.
It is.
It makes people can question their own senses of what they see and hear and understand. They make people think, is it okay? No, it is okay. But getting you to question yourself is the victimization by people like RFK Jr. They want you to question everything so that you'll begin to question everything, and therefore maybe then they'll be trusted somehow, I guess.
That's exactly right. They take something that has a nugget of truth to it. So if you look at the whole picture of Tylenol in pregnancy, for example, there are a lot of studies out there. And some of the studies, depending on the type of study, and this is important, some of the studies do show an association, and other studies show no association. But an association...
Not causality.
Exactly. And when you look at all of the studies together, there is no causation. But he takes that little bit of information and he seeds fear in people. And it's misinformation, it scares people, it divides people. And that's what he uses to control us.
Have you any idea? This is more of a political question. Why would Donald Trump put him in his cabinet? Give him the authority. If he was just a nut out there pushing something, people would say, forget about him. But he is Secretary of Health and and Human Services, so we got to take him seriously. Like he's one of those. He's an authority.
He is. It's so crazy. He's in charge of the CDC. He's in charge of the NIH, all of these flagship institutions that not just me, my colleagues as physicians in the United States, but physicians all over the
Yeah.
world.
It's an
Yeah.
enormously successful and wonderful institution. I had prostate cancer. They dealt with it. My mother-in-law had cancer. They dealt with it, extended her life dramatically. I have to tell you, it's a wonderful institution. Fauci's was out there for years. It's an amazing institution. I hope he doesn't screw with it.
Well, he already has. I mean, I'm an OBGYN doctor. One of the first things they did was take down guidelines that we use every day to treat sexually transmitted infections, to help people get contraception when they have medically complicated histories. So those pieces of information were gone until we housed them in a different place. That's what we're finding is we have to find places within our professional organizations. As doctors, we have to bond together. As healthcare professionals, we have to bond together. That's the work that we do with the Committee to Protect Healthcare to make sure that our patients have good, reliable, scientific data to base their decisions on, not politically motivated data, which is what we're getting from RFK.
What are they doing with sexually transmitted diseases? What's going on there?
We've got these guidelines that we use to help us. For example, gonorrhea is complicated to treat. There are more cases of drug resistance gonorrhea now than ever. So we have to be really thoughtful about how we treat them and what we use to treat it. If we run out of options, we're not going to be able to treat this disease that's more than just a sexually transmitted infection. It causes arthritis. It causes permanent disability down the road for people. So it's really important to treat these things. So we need these guidelines because often these things are so complicated that we can't keep all this in our heads. So we turn to these guidelines to make sure that we're doing the right thing. And the guidelines are constantly updated with new studies and new information. So we are giving our patients cutting edge treatments.
We have a couple of grandkids now, and about 1 year old, both of them, Maggie and Killian. And the question is, what guidance are their parents getting? My kids getting for their vaccination schedule? Are they under the same vaccination schedule that we grew up with?
Hey, that's a great question because there's a lot of uncertainty right now. We know that the ACIP, which is the organization within the CDC that puts together the vaccine recommendations, all of those scientists were fired. And all of the people who were brought in are people with a political agenda. And we've seen some decisions already starting to come out of this committee that are scientifically questionable. So we haven't seen many changes yet with regards to the vaccine schedule, but we certainly anticipate it and we are bracing for it. This is why the American College of Physicians, the American College of OBGYNs, the American College of Pediatrics, we're all pushing back because we have an obligation to take care of our patients and to keep politicians out of our exam rooms.
You know, I was in the doctor getting a medical checkup, and by the way, I just got a COVID check so I can go overseas. You can't travel without a COVID vaccination. And the doctor he's been practicing forever, and his brother's house. And I kept thinking his sadness when he talked about what's going on with RFK Jr. running Health and Human Services. Like all these years of helping parents deal with their children, how surviving parents, grandparents, all his life, just trying to help people be healthier with their lives. And along comes this clown who just says, does anybody know what motivates RFK? Why? Was it all the years of heroin use? What was it?
Yeah, who knows? I mean, isn't it always money and power with these folks in
Did Aaron
politics? Maybe. I don't
He didn't
know.
go to medical school. He didn't study. He's not a nurse. He doesn't have any practical experience.
No, there are some things, though, that RFK talks about that I agree with. I think we need a healthier, cleaner environment. I would love to see food dyes not present anymore. There have been efforts to change some of these things. And, it's a challenge, but it's the misinformation. It's he told us in front of the Senate committee that he was not going to prevent us from getting vaccines, and then turned around and the FDA did not approve COVID vaccines for this fall. So what are we supposed to do as a population of people who are seeking health, who are seeking preventive care, but we can't get it? Chris, it's very concerning.
Is he a committed anti-vaxxer?
It appears so, and his history would suggest that that is the case, but that's not what he told the Senate committee.
To get confirmed, yeah, because he had to get past that.
Right.
Not have to say anything to get past Trump, apparently.
Yeah. I don't even know what to say about that. But you know who I was really disappointed in? Dr. Kennedy or Dr. Cassidy out of Louisiana. Representative Cassidy.
I like Cassidy, trying like hell. He's from a conservative district, a conservative state of Louisiana. And I know he had to be to lunch years ago, and I could tell he's been trying to get through this crazy world through a peephole where he can actually speak honestly and completely to the American people and to his state.
We need that. Louisiana needs that. Louisiana has 38 hospitals that are at risk of closing because of Trump's big, beautiful bill. Louisiana needs help and leadership. But when Cassidy voted to confirm RFK Jr., I don't know what kind of a deal he thought he was going to get, but I mean, he's a physician. And as a fellow physician, we were all counting on him and hoping that he would be that person who would come through for us.
Because it is the world's greatest deliberative body, but it has to deliberate. It has to use its brain. It just sits there, your brain, and it tells you how to follow your conscience. And at some point when you got people like that, and you have to talk to Tom Tillis and others, you got to say, wait a minute, are you going to use your brain and your conscience? Because if you don't use your brain, you're not going to get to your conscience. And you're going to have to decide when to say no. Senators, president for cabinet appointments or for the judiciary, and they have to do it. Thank you. Please doing your job. You're with the Committee to Protect Health Care. I hope you can have your voices heard. And please come back here to our Hardball and Substack and fill us in on what dangers that lie ahead with RFK Jr. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chris. We won't stop fighting for our patients.
Well, thank you so much. You're the best. Thank you so much.